Thank you. Now, our next witness.
Good afternoon, Chair Jackson, Chair Gray, members of the committees. Dan Levitt with the San Joaquin Joint Powers Authority. The San Joaquin service is the 5th largest intercity station, service in the country. We carry about 1.2 million passengers a year. We have 6 daily round trips, 4 of which are between Oakland and Bakersfield and 2 between Sacramento and Bakersfield. Our corridor is 365 miles long, and we have 18 stations. The San Joaquins have an extensive throughway bus network that carries San Joaquin passengers throughout California and even to Reno and Las Vegas. After about 13 years of steady growth, last year the San Joaquins actually went down in both ridership and revenue, first time in 13 years. And this is in spite of the fact that the economy was way up and the growth in the San Joaquin corridor is actually one of the highest growing parts of the state. So really, to ensure the continued growth of the San Joaquin service and the benefits increase to the state and to the corridor, we really need to improve the San Joaquin, and in particular, we need to have more frequency for the San Joaquin service. The San Joaquins have much less frequency of service than either the Capital Corridor or the Pacific Surfliner service. In fact, if we look at the San Joaquins, there's been no additional frequency of the San Joaquin added between Oakland and Bakersfield in more than 2 decades, 22 years. And between Sacramento and Bakersfield, it's been 13 years since we added another round trip for the San Joaquin service. Now, the good news for the San Joaquin service is that with the hard work of the state, that for fiscal year 15-16, we're looking to add another round trip between Oakland and Bakersfield to give the 7th daily round trip. In addition, the state's been working towards getting an 8th daily round trip between the Bay Area and San Joaquin. And the San Joaquin Joint Powers Authority, it's a very high priority to get the additional funding needed for that 8th daily round trip. San Joaquin ridership to and from Sacramento is severely constrained with having only 2 daily round trips. And as Member Gray knows, that these trips aren't necessarily the time of day people want to travel. One of the trips actually gets into Sacramento at 11:30 p.m. Increasing service to Sacramento is essential for the future growth of the San Joaquin service. The San Joaquin corridor has always been operated where all the trains go from one end of the corridor to the other. So we have our first train that leaves Bakersfield at 4:55 a.m. Well, that train going up the corridor doesn't get into Oakland until 11 a.m. The first train to Sacramento doesn't get to Sacramento until 12:30, past a lot of times when you want to get to Sacramento. And the first train going from Oakland to Bakersfield doesn't get you to Bakersfield until noon. So what we'd like to really look at in the future is being to have our services start in the mid-corridor, where we could start at Merced or Fresno, and we could get travelers to Oakland, Sacramento, or Bakersfield by 8 in the morning, which would make a big difference in terms of business travelers wanting to take the service. We want to highlight that the San Joaquin service is really complementary and provides important feeder services to high-speed rail, that with our service and our thruway buses, we provide important connectivity to Sacramento, the Bay Area, and the northern San Joaquin Valley to the initial operating section of high-speed rail. For our 10-year capital cost program, we're estimating a $1.5 billion capital need, and we've outlined this in your one-page handout that we provided to you. The highest cost that we are looking at is the improvement needed between Sacramento and Stockton to get more service to Sacramento. We believe that we're actually going to need a new track, 49 miles all the way from south of Stockton to Sacramento, and we're estimating the cost of that at about $600 million. And once we have that, then we'd be able to have frequent service to and from Sacramento. We are working and discussing this with the State Transportation Agency and with the High Speed Rail Authority, trying to get the planning money needed to move this effort forward. I wanted to highlight that improvements to our service and the other services can be done incrementally. To get the 8th daily round trip for the San Joaquins, we need $100 million to get that 8th daily round trip. So that's a nice, I mean, it's still a relatively large chunk of money, but it's small in comparison to the overall needs of the corridor. Our capital program includes additional service to the Bay Area, safety and speed improvements, new train sets and new stations, which are needed for having additional frequencies of service. This is a very exciting time for intercity passenger rail service in California. We look forward to working with you to try to get the funding to not only grow the San Joaquin service, but the other services in the state as well.
Thank you very much. Perfectly timed, and certainly starting to hear a common theme, so thank you. Our next presenter.
Good afternoon, Chair Jackson, and as well as Chair Gray and members of the committee. My name is Lucas Frericks. I'm a council member for the City of Davis, but also Vice Chair of the Capital Corridor JPA. The Capital Corridor intercity passenger trains operate along the 170-mile route connecting the metropolitan regions of Sacramento, San Francisco Bay Area, and San Jose, Silicon Valley. The trains stop at 17 stations serving 5 national universities, 3 international airports, numerous tourist destinations, the state capital, of course, and as well as some of the strongest employment sectors in the nation. Since 1998, there's been quite a bit of growth in the Capital Corridor, and the Capital Corridor JPA has been the managing agency for the Capital Corridor train service, during which time service frequency went from 8 weekday trains to 30 weekday trains. Ridership has grown 267%. Revenues have increased 367%. The fare box ratio has improved to 50%. On-time performance of the Capital Corridor is currently at 93%, which is the best in the Amtrak network nationwide for the past 5 consecutive years. And the Capital Corridor ranks second for customer service satisfaction ratings in the National Intercity Rail System. So between the inception of the service in 1991 through 2006, approximately $900 million has been invested in the corridor. Yet over the last 8 years, only $60 million has been allocated to support small-scale track upgrades and buy new rail vehicles. So with all due respect, this is not acceptable, nor is it a sustainable strategy for the nation's 3rd busiest intercity passenger rail route. Over the next 6 to 18 months, we will be completing environmental and design plans for projects that allow for the extension of hourly train service to both the Silicon Valley as well as east of Sacramento up into the Roseville area. The price tag for these projects is approximately $500 million, the equivalent cost of constructing 2 freeway interchanges. When complete, these projects will allow ridership on the Capital Corridor to increase by 15%. That's 1 in 7. Every 7 passengers will be a new rider to the Capital Corridor. While we are certainly grateful for the limited funding and that it does trickle to the Capital Corridor for operations and small-scale state-of-good repair projects, we do have a sizable gap to complete our project financing plans to implement the necessary infrastructure to meet the growing demand for the popular Capital Corridor trains. But certainly there is, and we've heard this from others, there is hope on the horizon. The governor, of course, and the legislature approved the continuous annual appropriation of 10% cap-and-trade dollars in the Transit Intercity Rail Cap program. We're certainly aware that in the first round of projects, the allocations of the TICRP funds are expected to be minimal due to the small size of the budget and the numerous applications from over 50 eligible applicants. However, we will hope that in the future, as money flows into the TICRP, it will grow in anticipation of higher auction revenues, of course, that will in turn and can provide the adequate and sustained funding which will allow the CCJPA to carry out our service expansion plans. Of course, the state will directly benefit from these investments as the Capital Corridor is positioned to meet the tenets of the state's cap-and-trade program by a reduction of VMTs, of course, on the congested I-80 and I-880 corridors, and, of course, helping both the Sacramento region and the Bay Area implement their sustainable community strategies in the Northern California megaregion. We certainly appreciate the support and advocacy of the Senate and the Assembly passenger rail committees, and we look forward to a partnership that will allow the Capital Corridor and other sister intercity rail 8 passenger trains agencies to receive the dedicated and sustained funds to ensure the continued popularity and success of these services well into the future. Thanks so much.
Thank you. And before we go to the next witness, I'm assuming that a lot of the timing of this train reflects commuter time travel.
Yes.
And would you say that's part of the success of this line, is that you're able to move people from work to from home to work and back because of the timing?
Absolutely right. The increased train sort of frequency, we've been able to ensure that folks are able to move both from the Bay Area to the Sacramento region and vice versa to make it on time to catch airplane flights, to make it in time for work in the morning. And we're seeing a huge amount of ridership increase, folks going both directions for purposes of work.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Next witness.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Chair Gray, committee members. I'm Dave Potter. I'm a 5th District Monterey County Supervisor, and I chair the Coast Rail Coordinating Council, and I'm also chair of the Transportation Agency of Monterey County's Rail Policy Committee. Today I'm here representing the emerging intercity services that will connect the central coast of California to the rest of the state. by two projects that we're advocating for. One is connecting Los Angeles with San Francisco via the return of the Coast Daylight. I come from the greater Boston area, and I would be shocked if you told me I couldn't go from Boston to New York via rail. And yet in the state of California, the two largest metropolitan areas in the state are not connected by rail service, but rather by an antiquated highway and congested highway system, or an oversubscribed and underserved system of airports. The other project we're proposing is the extension of the Capital Corridor train from San Jose down to Salinas. Let me just briefly describe those two projects for you. The Coast Rail Coordinating Council has been advocating passenger and freight rail improvements on the coastal corridor, including the Coast Daylight service, for over 20 years. The coastline is an antiquated relief route for the busier freight traffic in the valley, and it's really the low-hanging fruit for modernization of a significant bang for the buck and immediate benefits. This service is included in the state rail plan and will close the gap in service between Northern and Southern California. It'll carry an estimated 125,000 passengers. $6 million has been included in the state fund estimate for operations and implementations in fiscal year 16-17. Amtrak has agreed to provide equipment to operate this service. Our host railroad negotiations, surprise, surprise, have been stalled a bit and have been basically our primary hurdle in moving forward.
And stalled by what?
Protracted discussions about capacity and improvements on the line. We have a belief that there's a significantly smaller amount of improvements that need to be done and a significantly smaller amount of capital invested.
And who are those negotiations with?
Union Pacific.
Union Pacific.
We have $25 million in Proposition 1B money, plus additional STIP funds dedicated to sidings, but the railroad wants 4 times that amount. And we will need state assistance to close this gap. The current strategy is to pursue incremental access rights through Amtrak in close coordination with LoSan, Caltrans, and CalStop. We need the state to help us in the negotiations with UP to make this service happen. The other project is...
Before that begs the question, what state intervention would you like to see?
Well, I think that any legislative or lobbying or pressures that could be put on Union Pacific, recognizing that they own the rail line, but it's, I think, socially unconscionable to hold us hostage, as they have over the years, to go ahead and say, we're going to use this for anticipated freight capacity without actually getting down to the qualifications or quantifications of what their needs are. We've done repeated capacity studies that we do, go in for review, gather dust on the shelf, and then become outdated, and we have to do another one. The level of frustration on that, as you can tell, is a little bit high.
Thank you.
And it's just a repeated pattern. I would hope that we could have a more productive discussion with the higher level officials at UP and maybe move forward. The extension of the Capital Corridor trains to San Jose and Salinas is a project I'm parochially very excited about. It provides an alternative to the highly congested US 101 corridor to provide access to jobs, education, health care, and interregional transportation into the Silicon Valley and the San Francisco Bay Area. Projected ridership of 133,000 will reduce greenhouse gas emissions by removing vehicles from our congested highway and regional roadway network. The Highway 101 corridor between Salinas and San Jose is one of the most congested systems in the state of California. This project promotes mixed use, transit-oriented development, affordable housing, livable communities, and economic growth. This extensively collaborative endeavor has regional and statewide support. We're excited to have a fully funded first phase of the project, and we're applying for funding for the second phase. We look forward to working with the state to fund train sets and operations for this service as part of the state rail plan. In closing, let me just let you please know that the emerging corridors have been strong partners with the existing intercity services and believe that this success should be shared in more parts of the state. I'd personally like to thank you for the formation of the select committees so that together we have a better opportunity to advocate for increased and improved services throughout the state of California as a collaborative effort. Thank you very much.
Well, that's, I think, the purpose of this effort is to see what we can do to make it happen. Thank you very much for your testimony. And our next witness.
Good afternoon, Chair Jackson and Chair Gray and committee members. I'm pleased to be here. My name is Mark Watts. I'm here on behalf of the Riverside County Transportation Commission, and I want to present an overview of the Coachella Valley-San Gorgonio Pass Rail Corridor Service. As our lead speaker indicated, the state's expansion program does include service to new markets, and I'm pleased to introduce you to this Coachella Valley Extension Corridor. If implemented, this corridor would connect the LA Basin with its 7.2 million jobs and more than 16 million in population with the Coachella Valley that experiences 12.2 million annual visitor trips each year. We presently see 130,000 visitor trips daily through the San Gorgonio Pass, and the route we are examining would be 141 miles in length with a running time of about 3 to 3.5 hours. The current host railroads on this line now include BNSF, UP, and Metrolink. Currently, there are very limited transit options in this corridor, and to address this, the Riverside County Transportation Commission, in coordination with Caltrans, the FRA, and the Coachella Valley Association of Governments, undertook studying of the expansion of Amtrak passenger rail service to the Coachella Valley through the San Gorgonio Pass. We are underway with the necessary analysis of the alignments, and we have several options to look at on the two sides divided at Colton. West of Colton, there's a series of alternatives to look at, just as there are alternatives on the east side of Colton. Our first phase of the FRA process includes the alternatives analysis and preliminary service development plan process, and this is expected to be completed in the fall of 2015. We will use the findings from this process in this first phase to decide whether a project can go forward. So you can see we are at the beginning steps of bringing this emerging corridor to the attention of the state of California. It is a little bit too soon to understand what basic service needs will be and therefore what the funding will be, so I can't really address that today, but that will unfold as time passes on. If we do make the decision that rail service may be an option, the next phase would be a formal environmental documentation phase to look at the impacts on the environment and how to mitigate these. And if approved at that point in time, we would then proceed to developing a full service development plan. And to this end, I'm very happy to let you know that this past April, the FRA awarded a $2.9 million grant to Caltrans and RCTC to assist in preparing and getting ready for that service development plan process. In closing, the connection that this service will provide will not simply be between the Inland Empire and downtown LA, but what you will see is the connectivity to Metrolink, to Lausanne, and to the future high-speed rail. So you will have great access from the Inland Empire to all of California, and conversely from California to the Inland Empire. So I thank you for your attention today, and hope to.
Thank you very much.
See you in the
Appreciate
future.
it. Questions? Go ahead quickly. We're almost back on time. So.
Yeah, I wanted to direct a question to Mr. Levitt. You mentioned the possibility of scheduling changes on the San Joaquin corridor, and certainly I would strongly encourage us to move forward as quickly as possible towards that end. You know, we still suffer in those communities in the central San Joaquin Valley from the highest rates of poverty and unemployment in the state, and giving folks access to some of these pockets of economic activity in the more urban areas and on the coast, and where they've certainly seen a much quicker recovery from the recession than we have. That effort is critical to that, because as you stated, starting in Bakersfield at 5 or 6 in the morning and getting to Oakland or Sacramento at halfway through the workday doesn't provide any opportunity for anyone. Starting in a more central location, Fresno, Merced, Madera, Turlock, affords us, that opportunity for our constituents to access those markets, and I think just couldn't be more critical as people struggle to regain their economic footing here in California and certainly in the Central Valley.
I think that's a pretty concise statement that obviously exists in that area and frankly throughout the state. That's why this seems like such a win-win. If we can move these people to and from, it'll stimulate growth, and I know certainly that's the thought and the goal behind the high-speed rail project. But in the meantime, there's a lot, I think, that we can do and need to be doing to try to stimulate that activity throughout the state. Couldn't agree with you more. So let's talk now with David Kutrosky, who is the Managing Director of the Capital Corridor, on some of the funding issues that you're experiencing, and I suspect we're not going to hear anything particularly unique, but certainly would love to hear what your thoughts are.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you, Chair Gray, for being here, and committee members, Senator Galgiani. My name is David Kutrosky. I'm the Managing Director for the Capital Corridor. While I am in that position, I am here today to wrap up our presentations to you. I think, as you heard, there are common themes, nothing unique, but it does need to be stated for our appreciation for the partnership that we have with you in the Select Committee, as well as our partners in the state. Readiness by these agencies is key to take these popular corridors to the next level of performance, and we have most eager to work with you and the legislature to develop financing plans to close our funding gaps. Our story is no different than the recognition by the governor of the $59 billion shortfall in funding needs for the state highway system and local roads. As in fact, 20% of our passenger miles are on those connecting motor coaches that you've heard about that use the state's highway system and local streets and roads. So we believe our $6.6 billion investment is a necessary and wise investment to protect the state's prior $3 billion investment in the successful intercity passenger rail program that's here in the state and recognized nationally as the premier intercity passenger rail program. We truly appreciate and support the inclusion of intercity rail in the cap-and-trade program, but as you've heard, the current program does not adequately address the sizable funding needs for intercity passenger rail. We strongly encourage the Select Committee to develop a dedicated, sustainable funding program for the California Intercity Passenger Rail Program for FY16 and future years to make sure it's committed and dedicated. And just as a side note, when we talk about this program for intercity passenger rail, there are co-benefits that can be achieved with Metrolink, Caltrain, Coaster, and ACE. So we just want to let you know that while the money is coming to the intercity rail program, we want to make sure we partner with our other passenger rail colleagues. This investment will allow the existing and emerging corridors to meet our service plans as presented in the federally mandated state rail plans and meet the growing passenger demand for these popular trains. Just as importantly, as you probably heard, this represents a sustainable solution that will drive down vehicle miles traveled, pun intended, for on the state's congested highways, which will reduce greenhouse gas emissions while encouraging mixed-use development near the train stations. Once again, thank you for the opportunity to tell our story, and we look forward to working with you to develop a sustainable, dedicated funding source.
Thank you very much. You know, it sounds like you just need to relocate geographically, but the story seems to be the same. And I wonder, clearly getting more commuter-timed trains has been a tremendous boost to passenger ridership. By pulling people out of their cars, we're reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Certainly a clear connection with the cap-and-trade monies, but it sounds like we need to find other resources, because that amount, while significant, does not come up anywhere near to what we need, not only to grow what we've got, but to improve the system to make it 21st century ridership. I mean, to think that, you know, in Japan those trains go fast. You can get from place A to B in extraordinary, and that they're smooth riding trains, and I'm told that they haven't had a single passenger fatality on their high-speed rail since it was implemented. I mean, here we are seeing a number of, and we'll get into that. Our next session's next program is going to be on the safety aspects of train travel, but the fact that really, if we can get trains at the right time, if they can be comfortable and reliable and they move efficiently and in a timely fashion, I think that there's tremendous opportunity here in all these corridors. And I want to thank you for your efforts in working together. It seems to me that everyone, we all have our own particular needs, but recognizing this as its real success is going to be on a statewide basis, connecting the different areas. So Are there any questions with this panel? Any other questions or comments? All right. In that case, thank you very much for your testimony, and we'll move on to our final panel, which is improving passenger rail safety. And this is probably, frankly, the most important of all the discussions today, because we do have people riding the rails. We want them to. We have people driving across the rails because we need to do more with our infrastructure and grade separations and at-grade crossing improvements, and that should be where we start. We have Darrell Johnson, who is with the Orange County Transportation Authority, the CEO, and if you will address those issues, because I know they're a problem in Orange County, and they're a problem, I think, throughout the state. So good afternoon, and thank you for being here.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. My name is Darrell Johnson, the Chief Executive Officer for the Orange County Transportation Authority, and we're right in the heart of the Low-Sand Corridor with both Amtrak Metrolink service as well as freight service. And in our role as a transportation planning agency that's multimodal, we have a real keen interest in ensuring the safe interaction of all of our modes, and that includes rail safety, vehicular safety, as well as looking at goods movement issues around the rail corridor. As part of these efforts, we've pursued and completed one, but we've pursued two separate safety improvement programs. One is entirely focused on at-grade crossings, and one is focused on a grade separation program. In 2005, we began efforts on our at-grade crossing safety program. We own 42 miles of mainline right-of-way that Metrolink and Amtrak operate on, and in that 42 miles are 52 at-grade crossings. We did a comprehensive study to assess each and every one of those grade crossings, to look at their traffic, to look at their pedestrian activity, to look at their bicycle activity, and to look at their rail activity. We used that study to prioritize a set of improvements that we ultimately put forward in our local sales tax measure that went to the voters in the fall of 2006. We created a comprehensive safety program that was embedded into that program. Under this program, which we've called the Orange County Railroad Crossing Safety Enhancement Program, we partnered with 8 cities. So there's 8 cities in that 42-mile program, and we made improvements, significant safety improvements at each of the 52 at-grade crossings. Throughout this process, we worked extensively and very closely with the Public Utilities Commission here in California, as well as the Federal Railroad Administration, which has significant jurisdiction over certain aspects of the railroad crossing program. I would also point out that there are, as we're the railroad owner, but our tenants include Metrolink, Amtrak, and the Burlington Northern Santa Fe, or the BNSF. So they were in part and parcel of our program as well. We started the work in 2010, and we put that underway, and we completed the work in approximately 2013. The program was approximately $90 million, or in rough terms, just under $2 million per crossing for all of the improvements that we made. As I mentioned earlier, we did fund it with our local sales tax, but we asked each city to provide 12% local match. So OCTA funded 88% of the program, and the local cities funded 12% of the program. We felt that was important, that we developed a partnership as the cities owned the roadways and OCTA owned the railroad right-of-way, and we wanted to keep that sense of partnership together. To give you a sense of the types of improvements that were included, we extended medians, we added gate crossing arms, sometimes 3, sometimes 4. We modified driveways, we added pedestrian gates, we modified sidewalks, we moved bicycle paths, and we did a number of other things to close access to the rail corridor. In addition to that, I mentioned the Federal Railroad Administration earlier. They had a train horn rule that allowed for the implementation of quiet zones. So we added additional enhancements at the city's discretion in the corridor, and we have created the single largest series of quiet zones anywhere in the state of California, and I believe to this date it is still the largest single one in the state of in the United States. So the train horns no longer blow at these 52 crossings in addition to that. Safety is important, and there's a physical component, but there's also an educational component. So as part of our program, we also included a robust rail safety awareness campaign that included the development of best practices for approaching rail crossings, and we developed a series of materials in multiple languages focusing on youth in particular. We did a series of outreach to local schools and communities, particularly in the densest part of the county where we had a lot of pedestrian traffic at the crossings. Secondly, we have worked on something we call the OC Bridges program, and this is a focused effort on our highest priority grade crossings to turn them into grade separations, where we fully separate the grade crossings, the at-grade crossings. We have a series of 7 that are currently underway, and we call this our OC Bridges program, and really it fully separates the rail traffic from the street traffic. We're focused on our east-west corridor, which is owned by the BNSF on the northern part of the county, and it's the gateway that comes out of the ports of LA and Long Beach. So if you look at the activity there from a freight standpoint, there's currently approximately 70 trains per day, freight trains per day, another dozen passenger trains, including Metrolink and Amtrak. And our forecast, working with the ports, with the railroads, and the passenger railroads, we see those growing to as much as 130 trains per day over the course of the next 20 years. The program was initiated in 2008. Again, we focused on partnership with the local cities, which include Anaheim, Fullerton, Placentia, Yorba Linda, as well as with the Department of Transportation, Caltrans, and the Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railroad. The partnership's important. We need to work in each other's physical space as well as understand the business needs of each entity. I would point out that all of the 7 grade separations we're working on were listed by the California Public Utilities Commission in their top 50 grade crossings with safety issues. The program is nearly $650 million, and the question always becomes, how do you find $650 million all at once to do a program of that size? And what we did was a 3-part deal. I mentioned earlier our local sales tax measure. We had a component in that for arterial improvements and safety improvements. About 1/3 of the funding came from that program. We were able to use that and match it against the state Proposition 1B TCIF program. So about 1/3 of the program came through the state. And then the final third, we went through I would say the normal federal funding process, and we looked largely at existing federal congestion mitigation and air quality funds, CMAQ funds. So we really had a very focused 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 partnership between the local, state, and federal program. 2 of the projects are completed and open to traffic. All 4 of them are all 4 of the others are under construction. They have all been awarded. All the properties have been acquired, and we expect all of the projects to be open in late 2017 in that corridor. Would also point out that this is in addition to 4 other grade separations that we've recently completed, which have been in a more lengthy process over about a 6-year period. We completed 1 in Irvine, 2 in Irvine, excuse me, 3 in the city of Irvine, as well as Imperial Highway. So over the last 4 years, we've attacked 12 full grade separations in the corridor. We've made it a priority for us.
If you could wrap up, I'm sorry. We
Yes.
get 5 minutes per person.
I'm sorry.
That's
Finally,
okay.
I'll just close by saying that I believe you're never finished with safety, and we continue to advance projects through planning and engineering. Even though we don't know where the construction funding is coming from, we think that's an important way to do it, to be shelf ready for these types of projects in the future. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. And this is an issue I know in my district, and I suspect in a lot of our districts, where we just don't have that protection and desperately need it before we have more accidents.